Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both.
Hey, Tanya, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You can tell I got my sunny disposition on a sunny day.
It's back.
It's back. Well, and we have some wonderful and informative stories coming to this week's edition, so we're going to dive right in. Thad, do you want to fill us in on this lovely cover from Kimberly Ware?
Yeah, so Kim did a follow-up story for us this week looking at the Humboldt Income Project, which folks might remember we wrote about probably roughly a year ago when it was announced that this would be coming to Humboldt. But it is a local pilot project kind of testing out this idea of universal basic income. So I think for many folks, this kind of first came on the national radar anyway during Bernie Sanders' first campaign for president when he broached it as an idea that he wanted to see rolled out as a national scale. But it's really been around since, I don't know, the 60s or 70s. But basically this idea that if you give residents a dependable, a low but basic sum of income every month, there's a lot more room for upward mobility. There's a lot more room for people to take chances on starting new careers, on seeking education, and there's just a net community benefit to these types of programs. So Humboldt qualified for one of these, and was again announced about a year ago that they were going to roll out a program for expectant families, expectant mothers specifically. About 120 of them would be selected for this program and would receive $920 a month going forward. And so this is a payment that they get kind of no questions asked, no requirements. They have to meet basic income requirements to be selected for the program, which is that they were in their first or second trimester of pregnancy and that they were making less than 200% of the federal poverty line, which equates to about $30,000. And so, if they met those qualifications, they were eligible for the program, and then they selected both a group to get the $920 a month and then also a control group that will only get $20 a month to kind of compare them against. But they can do, like I said, whatever they choose with this money. This program is a little bit unique from ones that have been done elsewhere and kind of special because they framed it or they created it in such a way that it doesn't affect eligibility for other social net services. And so, a lot of times for folks living in poverty, they face these kind of Faustian bargains of, do I accept this raise at my job or do I accept this one form of assistance, knowing that it might cut my eligibility for Medi-Cal or CalFresh or some other programs that, that I depend on to make ends meet. This money is exempt from those programs, and so they could really accept it without worry of those things. And then it really gives the researchers who are studying this issue a better idea of kind of what the net benefits are. So now a ways into this program, Kim caught up with the folks putting it on, and then also a couple of the participants to just kind of talk to them about what a difference it's made in their lives and what they're seeing.
Definitely, and I think it was really focused on two folks that both had really amazing stories of how this has helped them.
Yeah, so first Kim caught up with Iris, a woman who has a new family now, so has a toddler now, and really got to talk about how receiving this money enabled her and her partner to both stay home for a while in their child's first weeks of life, and not kind of immediately try to go rushing back to work. And then she ended up taking some months off to just really focus on informing that bond and creating kind of a stability in their home that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Especially with, amid kind of all the added expenses of parenthood. As Kim notes in the story, having a child is not cheap, as us parents out there know. And so she just, I think, really provided a lot of insight about how, this money enabled them to do that, really allowed them to kind of start off this new life together as a family unit on much more stable financial footing. They actually moved into a new place that they wouldn't have been able to afford otherwise. And just really, she seemed to feel like it really just alleviated stress and allowed them to just focus on family time, which is so crucial in those first months.
And it's absolutely, I mean, who could ask for anything more time to actually be home with an infant? And instead of money that just probably would have ended up going to a place, for childcare.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And she runs a cleaning business, and so talked about, that otherwise she would have felt like she had to get back to work, really, really quickly. And and certainly most of her earnings would have gone to childcare, and who knows kind of how they would have been able to set that up. And then Kim spoke to another woman who chose to remain anonymous in the story, but who actually was unable to bring her pregnancy to term, and talks about kind of that when this happened. She went to the McKinleyville Family Resource Center, which is who's administering this program locally, and said kind of that she'd lost her baby and wasn't sure if she should still be in the program. And they said that they really intentionally created the rules of this program to allow her to stay in and allow folks in her situation to stay in. And she talked about just how life-changing that the money has been for her, and that it's really allowed her to get out of an unhealthy relationship, or what she described as an unhealthy relationship, which she wasn't sure she would have been able to do otherwise. And then she has decided to go back to school and is pre-med with the goal of going to med school and becoming a doctor, which sounds like was a dream of hers that kind of had long been deferred to various life events and financial challenges. And so she just views this money as having been really life-changing, and really having set kind of a new trajectory for her life.
It's just a wonderful story. And I do recall, when the Journal ran the first story about this. So it's wonderful to catch up and see, how it's been turning out. And I recognize that obviously the data is going to take a while to compile, but the anecdotes are amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kim also caught up with Robin Baker, who's the executive director at the McKinleyville Family Resource Center, and she talked about kind of from her standpoint the pain of having the controlled trial aspect of it, which is that there's an equal number of women who were selected for this program, but like I said, aren't getting that $920. They're just getting $20 a month, but are going through the same kind of surveys and data gathering that the other group is, and it's really kind of vitally important from just a scientific perspective of having results to the study showing the impact that this money can have on people's lives that are really, because there is the control group to compare them against, is really kind of scientifically sound data. And the hope is really that will be impactful then in trying to promote kind of the expansion of programs like these in the future.
And one of I know in the article she mentioned that this was kind of built upon what Stockton had done years back, but the SEED program was not for expectant parents, correct? It was just a more broad base of eligibility, correct?
Yeah, the Stockton program, which was the first of its kind of in California anyway, just had basic income guidelines, and so as long as you made less than a certain threshold, you were eligible. And this one is, Humboldt is just one of dozens of sites, and it really allowed sites to kind of hone in on different demographic groups. And so the McKinleyville Family Resource Center really wanted to look at the impact on new families and expectant mothers, realizing that there is a wealth of scientific or a wealth of studies kind of indicating how crucial those first months to a couple years of a new family's life are in kind of determining trajectory, everything from health outcomes to educational outcomes. So they really wanted to focus on supporting folks during that time of transition. Other programs in other parts of the state were looking at, foster children transitioning into adulthood and other kind of groups that are on the cusp of large life transitions.
It's a wonderful article, and I hope everybody picks up this week's edition of the North Coast Journal and reads it for themselves. Before we move on to Jennifer, do you have any closing remarks about the cover?
No, I think Kim did a wonderful job, and so I'd really, as you said, encourage everybody to give it a full look. And then, in some time, probably 6 months to a year, we'll be reporting on kind of the final results of the program, which will have more data to analyze and stuff like that. So stay tuned.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing it to the preview, Thad.
Thanks, Tanya.
And with that, Jennifer has an amazing story from Olivia Gambino talking about some big balls that you're going to want to have around.
Let me tell you, I want to say that we're not a bunch of 12-year-olds. We have not been making jokes all week, but we have. Olivia Gambino, you may know her from the Journal. You may know her from writing about fashion. And in fact, she has a story about mismatched wedding party clothing for the upcoming wedding guide that should be on stand soon. She also is, among other things, a rutabaga queen, a burlesque performer, and honestly, a fantastic cook. Her cooking, she comes by through family means, including her, let me see if I can get this right, great-great-great-grandfather, who fled Italy in the 1870s and, like a lot of Sicilians, ended up in New Orleans. And once there, Italians began to influence the cuisine of New Orleans. So that Creole mix and Cajun mix of West Indian and Spanish and French cuisine, all in that southern state of Louisiana, started to absorb Italian cooking, and her family came out of that. And eventually her dad had a restaurant when they moved to Illinois, Big G, indeed, Gaetano. He was originally, he grew up cooking and doing all kinds of restaurant work, but his dream was to have this restaurant, which he did, but he was also a Navy bomb specialist. And so I cannot help but find some connection between that and the amazing jambalaya balls that he made and taught Olivia to make, and that she's sharing with us this week in a recipe, which is a first in many ways for the Journal. Maybe not our first jambalaya, I'm not sure, but definitely the first to come with a Spotify playlist, which you should absolutely check out because it's fantastic and you can use it for some of the recipe. I will explain. But essentially, the recipe is for a homemade jambalaya, which you should just make anyway. And if you started making this recipe and after chopping chicken and andouille sausage and shrimp and everything and mincing up your Trinity and fire roasted tomatoes and Italian seasoning and Cajun seasoning and all this stuff, and then you were like, you know what, I'm just going to eat this jambalaya. I do not have it in me to make fried balls. I am not judging you for that. But it is basically like have you had arancini?
I have not, no.
Fantastic. It's a ball of rice. It's like a ball of risotto, essentially, with cheese inside, breadcrumbs outside, and fried to a crispy golden crust, like a planet I want to live on forever.
Right? Absolutely.
So fantastic. So that's an Italian dish. And this has mixed, instead of, the usual rice filling, it's got jambalaya. And jambalaya being that wonderful, spicy New Orleans dish that is just such a signature of that cuisine, that has spicy, garlicky sausage and just everything in it. And I love this about New Orleans cooking, is the idea that, well, we could just make this chicken, or we could put everything we've got into it. And yes, more.
Bring me 2 of every animal.
Yes, exactly. And then put cheese in the middle of it so that it's a wonderful, gooey, molten center. She brought these in so that we could photograph them here in the studio. But we also ate them, and they're fantastic. And they come with this wonderful kind of garlic and jalapeno aioli with green onions that she made that's just fresh and wonderful. So she has these fantastic directions. I know it works. It's foolproof. It is Mardi Gras in your mouth, and you should definitely make it. But also her instructions, as I said, there's a playlist that comes with it. So she says, for example, to cook the chicken until golden brown, about 5 minutes, or the length of Whitney Houston's "It's Not Right, But It's Okay," underrated Whitney song. Also the Trinity, your celery, peppers, and onions should be cooked and sweat in a pan for about 4 minutes, or the length of Genuine's Pony. It goes on like that.
I love that.
She has Fats Domino's Walking in New Orleans, is how long you should brown the balls in the canola oil when they get to frying. It's a fantastic recipe. She's tremendous fun, and I'm just so glad we have her voice in the On the Table column this week.
I also love that I'm not the only one that measures time by how many songs I've heard.
That's how I measure my commute.
I can't tell you how often I've been like, how long have I been at this? Oh, I've heard about 4 songs. So, probably about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I've done this with movies too, and I have literally made dumplings and put them on the table in the time it takes to watch Chronicles of Riddick again. It's shameful, but true.
Once upon a time when I had a paper route, it would take me almost the length of the Blues Brothers movie to roll my paper. Because it was perfect. It was musical. You could do other things, but still enjoy the movie.
This is going to be similar to the experience of making these jambalaya balls, which you absolutely should invest the time in doing. Worth it.
Well, and you have a little announcement before we pivot back to Thad.
Art fans, I have good news. We have yet another voice. We're so lucky. We still occasionally drag Gabrielle Gopinath back into our web to write about art. We have the marvelous L.L. Kessner, and we have Tamar Burris. She does wonderful work for us about local art and artists. And now we have Alexander Rondeau, who is Canadian. Look at us improving American-Canadian relations as much as we can.
Hey, somebody's got to do it.
I know. And this week he's writing about the Threshold Show, which is Tamara Avery's show at the Morris Graves Museum of Art. And he has some really great things to say about it, and how it's sort of reflecting a generation of people who are looking ahead at a very uncertain future. And they're just beautiful, lush paintings, and he's got a lot to say about it. So please check that out, and welcome Alexander Rondeau to our ranks.
Yes, welcome. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. Thad, I wanted to cut back to you and go over your news from the town hall this week that just happened on Monday, I believe.
Yeah, so we have spent the last couple weeks trying to ascertain kind of local impacts to a lot of the headlines we're seeing at the federal level. So that would be Trump's flurry of executive orders. That would be the cuts being enacted by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, and then the potential impacts of the budget deal that's working its way through Congress right now. And, honestly, largely a lot of those efforts have just been unsuccessful. That we have confirmed that there have been, federal layoffs locally, but we have been having a really hard time trying to figure out how many are getting any kind of measurables. We know that local grants have been affected by the executive order freezing federal funding, but we've had a really hard time ascertaining kind of how many, how much, and those types of questions. And so we tuned into to Congressman Huffman's town hall meeting on Monday, hoping to get some of that information, which he was kind of short on specifics too. Although there was, he did share some good information. There were some good questions, and we kind of just decided to package all of that up into a bit of a roundup story, basically saying, we don't have direct answers to a lot of the questions that we know a lot of local folks have, but we're trying. And here's kind of what we know right now.
And that seemed to be the theme of the town hall as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, it seems like the chaos reigns currently.
Yeah, and that's, I spoke to I spoke to Tori Starr, the CEO at Open Door, about both, potential cuts to Medicare, which are working their way through Congress right now, which is his primary concern. But then I was also asking questions just about kind of, the impacts of Trump's executive orders targeting DEI programs and transgender folks, and kind of whether, those were jeopardizing Open Door's federal funding, and questions like that. And one of the things he said is, we just don't know at this point. There's a lot of fear out there, and it seems like there's a lot of good reason to be afraid about the impacts of some of these things. But there's just so little coordination between the executive branch and the underlying entities that actually have to come up with the policy guidelines to implement his orders, that there's, they haven't taken that next step. And so there's a lot of uncertainty about kind of when the rubber meets the ground, what that's actually going to look like.
I did appreciate Mr. Starr's kind of resolute statement that we're going to do our best not to change the culture regardless.
Yeah, and he very much he said that kind of repeatedly to me throughout the course of our interview, that we might have to change some of our policies on paper to conform with federal funding guidelines and stuff like that, but we are not, we're going to do everything we can not to change our practice, what we're doing in our offices, how we're treating our patients, the services we're providing. But, he is very, very concerned about potential cuts to Medicaid. I'll just take a quick moment to say, that should be on everybody's radar in Humboldt County. There are 58,000 Humboldt County residents on Medi-Cal, the California incarnation of Medicaid. Any funding reduction to Medicaid will have pervasive impacts on healthcare delivery in Humboldt County. And that's, and Tori Starr was very careful to say that's for all Open Door patients. That's for all patients in Humboldt County, because all of these, healthcare delivery systems require a whole kind of spectrum of funding mechanisms, and you can't really impact one without impacting the delivery of all the services provided.
Well, we're gonna hold on to each other and keep walking.
All we can do.
Well, thank you, Thad and Jennifer. That wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick up your copy, or of course you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Shrum. Thanks for being with us and staying informed and supportive and strong here in our North Coast community.